All right, y'all. So listen, I'm ready to dive into the unknown. These 10 baffling sea mysteries will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the ocean. Let's check it out.
Most of our planet is covered by oceans, which hide countless secrets beneath their surface. We've only just begun to scratch that surface and to understand what's going on. But there are still far more unexplained mysteries than answered ones. Number 10. Scientists have estimated that there are up to 1 million species of animals that inhabit the world's oceans, but 2/3 of those remain undiscovered. Getting down to where these species live is an extremely difficult task, and even when a new creature is observed, it can be difficult to analyze them and figure out exactly what they are. That was highlighted in the summer of 2023, when scientists came across a strange underwater artifact they'd never seen before. The Seascape Alaska 5 expedition was an expedition run by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration between August and September of 2023. Scientists used 19 remote-controlled submersibles to explore the seafloor in the Gulf of Alaska. During one of these dives, the submersible came across an object that the scientists had never seen before. It looked like a golden orb, which was fashioned tightly to the seafloor rocks.
They say golden orb. I say it looked like an egg that done hatched something out of it, and we probably don't want to know what it is or be around to see what it is.
It was roughly 10 centimeters across and had a hole in the center, as if something had broken into the orb or broken out. One of the submersible's robotic arms was made to brush against the object. It found that it had a skin-like texture, which was damaged when the metal touched it. The submersible then collected the object with a suction tube so it could be brought to the surface and analyzed properly. The orb was found during a live stream, and the scientist at the time put forward some suggestions about what it could be. It isn't unusual to find deep-sea coral in this location, and that was one suggestion. But the most likely answer to this question was that it was either a sea sponge or the casing of an egg. There were many bright white sea sponges attached to the rocks where the mystery orb was found. Visually, there were some similarities in the shape between these sponges and the golden orb, but they weren't similar enough for scientists to be certain what it was. There are over 8,000 known species of sea sponges, but so far, scientists haven't been able to identify this golden object as any of them. The other possibility, that it was a casing for an egg, is even more intriguing. Many sea creatures will attach their eggs to rocks at the bottom of the ocean to stop them from being moved by the ocean current. But no known creature has eggs like this. The size of the orb is much larger than typical fish eggs, and it's extremely unusual for a single egg to be found by itself. Normally, sea creatures will lay multiple eggs in a single location. It's possible the other eggs were eaten by another sea creature, or that this unidentified species simply only lays eggs one at a time. Whatever it is, the orb was brought aboard the research ship and preserved so that it could be taken back to laboratories and studied further. Scientists were hopeful that they would get an answer to this strange mystery, but it would take some time for that to happen. This isn't the only mystery orb that's been discovered in the ocean in recent years either. In 2016, the research vessel, exploration vessel Nautilus, was exploring the sea off the coast of California when it came across a bright purple orb. This one exhibited independent movement, which the Alaskan orb didn't. It unfurled into 2 lobes and was about half the size of the Alaskan orb. In this case, scientists speculated that it may have been a type of gastropod, either a new species or one that isn't typically found in that area.
See, that's how I don't understand how people just go swimming in the ocean or diving into the water, bro. We don't even know what all is out there or what's continuing to be grown, however you want to put it, hatched, born. We don't know. Like, it makes me cringe when I see like TikTok videos of people like diving off of their boat way out, miles and miles out into the ocean, diving off their boat into the water and then getting back on their boat. Like, it just terrifies me, man. And to see stuff like that, that's just more reminders of just what could be out there. And my mind just races.
Number 9. On May 27, 1968, the USS Scorpion was scheduled to arrive at her home port after weeks in the Atlantic and Mediterranean. She would never return and was later found at the bottom of the ocean. But the Scorpion wasn't the first submarine to disappear in 1968, or the first to vanish for unknown reasons. In the first 6 months of 1968, 4 submarines from 4 different countries would all vanish without explanation. Half a century later, these mysterious events remain unsolved. The first to vanish was the INS Dakar. The Dakar was a T-class submarine that had been part of the British Navy during the Second World War. It had since been brought to the Israeli government and spent years in the seas around northern Europe in training. January 29, 1968, was supposed to be Dakar's first arrival in Israel, but 4 days earlier she disappeared. Her last message came just after midnight on January 25th. The submarine's last known location was just east of Crete. It wouldn't be until the 26th that the Dakar was reported missing and a search began, involving ships from multiple countries including Britain, Greece, and Lebanon. There was still a lot of tension in the area at the time. In October of 1967, there was a conflict between Egypt and Israel after the destruction of an Israeli destroyer by the Egyptian Navy. At first, there was a worry that this might have also been the result of some kind of conflict, but that was quickly ruled out. The cause of Dakar's sinking remained a mystery, though, in part because the wreck of the vessel wouldn't be found until 1999. Theories about the cause of the sinking include human error, or that the boat's snorkel was damaged after contact with another boat in a storm. Just days after the Dakar vanished, the French submarine Minerve was reported missing. She'd been sailing in the Mediterranean just south of France and was traveling using her snorkel. That meant she wouldn't be too far beneath the surface. On the morning of January 27th, the boat made radio contact with an aircraft to tell them that the Minerve would be reaching port in a few hours. It was the last contact anybody had with the vessel. When she didn't arrive in port, a search for the Minerve began. There was no obvious explanation for her disappearance. The captain was extremely experienced and had never had any problems before, and the boat itself didn't have any known issues. There had been a storm in the area, though, and it seemed likely that the cause of the disappearance was the same thing that had sunk the Dakar: bad weather, possibly damaging the boat while it was so close to the surface. Like the Dakar, it would be decades before the boat was found, resting in 3 pieces at the bottom of the sea. Both incidents were a tragic loss, but it would be the 3rd submarine to vanish in 1968 that would be the most mysterious. The K-129 was a Soviet vessel equipped with missiles that disappeared somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. On March 8th, the boat was supposed to send a scheduled radio message after 2 weeks of silence. That message never came, and a search for the vessel immediately began. The Soviet Navy spent 2 months trying to locate the ship. Over 200 flights were conducted to try to find the K-129, and 36 ships were sent to search the area. After 2 months, there was still no trace, and the search was called off. The search effort was larger than would be typical for a missing submarine, and it was assumed that the sub had some kind of significance. When the Soviet search stopped, the U.S. search began. In a secret mission to find the wreckage, the K-129 was located 1,500 miles northwest of Hawaii, and objects were recovered. What exactly was located on the wreck remains a mystery, as does the cause of the sinking. Some have speculated that the U.S. had known where the wreck was all along, as it was
That's what I was thinking. Like, just as soon as they stopped, you were ready to go, huh? You were ready to deploy your people out. That seemed a little bit odd to me. You knew the entire time. I was thinking that whole time, bro. Like, yo, that's crazy.
Responsible for the sinking. These theorists go on to suggest that the sinking of the USS Scorpion months later was retaliation for the sinking of the K-129. Both the Soviet and U.S. governments knew about these acts of hostile action, but decided to keep it a secret to stop the incidents from escalating. It's more likely that both incidents were caused by mechanical problems or human error, but the real causes in all 4 cases remains unknown.
Y'all believe that? I don't either. Definitely seems something shady going on. I don't believe it's mechanical. Okay. Yeah, tell that to somebody else.
Number 8. Many of the most famous ocean mysteries are those that involve the famous Bermuda Triangle. The area of sea between the islands of Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico has become the final resting place of many ships and planes. While the number of vessels that go missing in this area might not be any more than would be expected from such a busy shipping area, that doesn't make the disappearances that do happen any less mysterious. The disappearance that inspired the coining of the term for the phenomenon was the disappearance of the Marine Sulfur Queen. The Marine Sulfur Queen was a tanker that disappeared without a trace in 1963. She'd been built during the war and afterwards converted into a tanker to transport molten sulfur. This required significant modifications, but a lot of checks were put in place to make sure it was still safe. There were measures to make sure that if a leak did take place, it would be confined to just one part of the ship, and new frames to make the tanker even more sturdy. In January of 1963, the Queen passed her biannual checks without issue and was permitted to keep transporting molten sulfur. On February 2nd, 1963, she left Beaumont, Texas with a shipment to be transported to Norfolk, Virginia. Her tanks were almost full and she was already behind schedule. 2 days later, one of the sailors on board sent a message to a stockbroker as he was speculating on wheat futures. This message was sent out at 1:25 a.m. At 11:23 a.m., the broker got back to him, but there was never another response from the ship. It would take another 3 days before anyone realized the Queen was missing, and a search began. It was believed that the ship had disappeared not far from the coast of Florida, and the Coast Guards searched the area near where the ship had been during its final message. It was believed she'd vanished at some point in those 10 hours between the two radio messages. No trace was found during the official search, but on February 20th, some pieces of debris were located. These included life vests, a signboard, and a life ring that read Marine Sulfur Queen. The items were found 12 miles south of Key West. Due to the currents, this seemed to indicate that the ship was further out to sea than the Coast Guards expected when whatever happened had occurred. During the investigation, it was found that the Queen wasn't nearly as seaworthy as it seemed. Sailors had called the ship a floating garbage can, and there were frequent fires on board. These fires happened so often that the sailors weren't even concerned by them and would let them burn themselves out. This seemed to indicate that there had been some kind of failure on the ship, rather than anything mysterious. But even this explanation left people with questions. It wasn't uncommon for tankers of the Queen's type to break in two. It had happened at least 10 times before, but in each case, at least one part of the ship remains afloat long enough for the crew to signal for help. There had been no distress signals and no indication that anything was wrong. Whatever had happened, it had happened fast. The life vests led to more questions, though. There were indications that someone had been wearing these. The crew had time to put on life vests, but not time to set out any emergency message. There was no evidence of a fire or something more violent on the pieces of debris that were collected, and no large patches of sulfur were ever located. The Marine Sulfur Queen was reported on heavily by newspapers in the U.S. Just a year after she went missing, Vincent Gaddis came up with the term Bermuda Triangle, an area that covered where the disappearance occurred. Other than the small pieces of debris, the wreck of the Marine Sulfur Queen has never been located, and what happened to her and the 39 people on board remains an unsolved mystery.
And the scary part about that is we still have not figured out what is happening to all these ships and planes and different things that go missing in the Bermuda Triangle. What will we figure out in our lifetime? Will we figure it out? I want to know what it is, bro. I'm scared to death of it too at the same time. I don't even want to go nowhere near it. Ever. But I definitely want to know, man. And I hope we figure this thing out because, bro, this is one of those phenomenons that just, I don't know, man. It just has everyone stumped. Everyone stumped. And then I watch videos where people talk about it who've been to that area. And it's just to hear them talk about it will send shivers down your spine.
Number 7. The disappearance of the SS Poet is an ocean mystery that has attracted a wide range of theories. including those that could be considered conspiracies. But while there are many theories, there's very little evidence or chance of an answer ever being found. The Poet was a former transport ship used by the US Navy during World War II. In the 1960s, it was converted for civilian use, and in 1979, bought by the Hawaiian Eugenia Corporation. It was this organization that named her the Poet and set the ship up to transport cargo across the Atlantic. On the 24th of October, 1980, she left Philadelphia with a crew of 34 people and a cargo of corn. Most of the crew members had been sailing for many years. It was an unpopular job, mostly because the crew would be traveling to Egypt and it wasn't considered an exciting journey, but it would mean that the crew would be home in time for the holidays. The ship was supposed to send updates every 2 nights, giving its location and other details about its journey. The first of these came during its first evening at sea. At just after midnight that night, the last contact with the Poet came. One of the crew members spoke with his wife over the ship-to-shore radio. Everything seemed fine, and there was no reason why he wouldn't be home when the job was finished. Even though the ship was supposed to check in every 2 days, it took several missed check-ins before the ship's owner contacted authorities. He believed they'd missed the check-in due to atmospheric issues or something similar. It wasn't until November 3rd when the Coast Guard was contacted, and a search for the ship began on November 8th. For 10 days, ships searched the area around where the Poet was last seen in search of any clues. The search ended with no answers. There had been a storm in the path of the Poet the day after she was last heard from. Several smaller ships were sunk, though their crews managed to survive the ordeal. At 500 feet in length, the Poet would have been able to handle the storm, as long as everything aboard was working correctly. It was speculated that the ship hadn't been seaworthy. It had recently passed the required checks, but there was at least one vault door that malfunctioned frequently. It was possible that this or something else aboard the ship had broken, letting water get to the corn. If the corn expanded, it would have damaged the ship further and sunk it. There are some other wild theories, though. Some suggested that the ship had been hijacked by the Gambino mob family, who had taken it to Iran. There, the cargo and the ship itself were sold so the hijackers could acquire controlled substances to be sold in the US. Another believed Ronald Reagan or someone from his team was responsible. When the ship went missing, the 1980 election hadn't taken place, but the theory suggests that someone on Reagan's team hijacked the ship to transport weapons to Iran. In both of these cases, it would require the ship to be transported across the Atlantic without anybody noticing.
I hate that I hear stuff like that, man. I hate that I hear stuff, because that doesn't do nothing but fuel the conspiracy theorist in me, bro. It doesn't do nothing. It doesn't help at all. Did you hear that?
The Bermuda Triangle is another explanation people have put forward. An eerie message was received by a radio operator in Baltimore the day after the Poet's last contact. It was a clear but weak auto alarm system which abruptly cut off. There's nothing to say for certain this was the Poet, but if it was, this might have been someone's final attempt for help. More than 40 years on, neither the Poet nor any answers to this strange mystery have been found. Number 6. An unsolved oceanic mystery that's been baffling scientists for decades is the cause behind a disturbing phenomenon that seems to be on the rise. Every year, roughly 2,000 sea creatures beach themselves on land around the world. So-called whale beachings have been happening all throughout recorded history. Toothed whales are the most common victims. This category includes dolphins, porpoises, and beaked whales. But other sea mammals, including baleen whales, sea lions, and seals, can also find themselves on land and unable to get back to the water. Normally when this happens, it's a single creature that comes to shore. In more disturbing events, dozens or even hundreds of marine animals can become stranded, covering beaches for miles and being unable to move. When this happens, there's a major effort to try to rescue as many sea creatures as possible. For larger animals, that can be especially difficult. Whales can breathe on land, but will overheat if not kept cool with water. They also risk damaging their organs by being on land for too long. When in the water, the buoyancy helps with the creature's massive weight, and without it, the organs risk being crushed. Sadly, while many whales have been rescued over the years, many more pass away and have to be dragged into the ocean or buried on the beach. Scientists have been trying to solve the mystery of why beachings happen. There are a few different theories, and it's possible that different events have different causes. Many of the animals that get beached use echolocation to navigate. It's possible that some kind of disruption to the system might be responsible. They could misinterpret readings or possibly suffer from hearing loss that would lead them into shallow waters rather than the deeper ocean. Of course, humans could also be disrupting this system by making noises under the water with sonar and ships. Scientists have found that fish that are exposed to high-volume noises for extended periods of time can have damaged ears, which might happen to some whales. Alternatively, another theory suggests that whales, being such social creatures, might be the cause of mass beachings. If just one whale is sick and goes to shallow waters, the rest of the group might follow it. It also leads to some creatures being unwilling to leave behind others who are stranded, even when they've been rescued themselves.
I believe that. If you ever see how they hunt, especially killer whales, have you ever seen them hunting their pack, their crew, their family? Like, they do. So I would definitely believe that if one felt some type of way or sickness or something, they're going to stick around until it either gets better or, you know what I mean? Or they all going to go out together. I believe that wholeheartedly. And the other fact that it could be us with the boats that are throwing them off. We need to look into that, bro. This ain't good at all.
It's also not clear if more whales are being beached today than in the past. The number of recorded stranding incidents has gone up, but this could simply be due to improvements in recording practices. Each stranding is a disturbing event, but scientists are still hopeful that one day they might be able to solve the mystery of why they happen, and hopefully get better at preventing these events in the future. Number 5. When looking at ocean mysteries, it's often mentioned that we have only explored a very small amount of the ocean beneath its surface. Only a small portion of the sea floor has been mapped, so it's not surprising to learn that scientists still have many unanswered questions about that ocean floor itself. This is especially the case for the Pacific Ocean, which is geologically unique. The Pacific Plate is the largest tectonic plate on the planet. It's roughly 40 million square miles and makes up the majority of the sea floor beneath the Pacific Ocean. It's most famous for being surrounded by the Ring of Fire, a series of volcanoes in deep trenches that surround the Pacific Ocean. It's roughly 185 million years old, dating back to the Jurassic period, and we know very little about it. What makes the Pacific Plate unique isn't its size, but the fact that it wasn't formed by another plate breaking apart. According to scientific research, all other modern tectonic plates on Earth were formed by older plates breaking apart. The African and South American plates were once a single plate, which broke apart to create two new plates. Even other ocean plates, such as the Nazca Plate off the Pacific coast of South America, were formed when a much older plate broke into three pieces. If the Pacific Plate wasn't created by another plate breaking into two, this left scientists puzzled about how the plate could have come about at all. Eventually, scientists were able to figure out that it was created by the separation at a triple junction of plate boundaries. This is when three plates meet and can be seen around the world. For example, the South American, African, and Antarctic plates all come together in the South Atlantic Ocean. But there aren't any new plates being built at any of these triple junctions. They're stable, meaning they don't change for tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of years. By itself, this wasn't a good answer to the mystery. Further research has come up with a speculative answer, but due to the unique nature of the Pacific Plate, it's hard to say for certain whether this is what really happened or just a best fit answer to the mystery. The oldest part of the Pacific Plate is called the Pacific Triangle. Unlike other ocean triangles, this isn't a place with any mysterious disappearances, but rather the mysterious appearance of a plate. It lies just east of the Marianas Trench, the deepest point in the ocean. By studying the magnetic anomalies and rocks in the sea floor in the Pacific Triangle, scientists were able to find traces of three ancient plate boundaries and the directions they were moving in. These plates were called the Farallon Plate, the Phoenix Plate, and the Izanagi Plate. Only small remnants of the first two plates exist today, and the third has disappeared completely, having been pushed under the Asian Plate. Rather than pushing against one another or spreading apart, the fault lines between these plates were all transformative. This is when the plates move parallel to one another. In this case, they would all turn in a clockwise motion as they moved past, creating an opening between them. This was the Pacific microplate, which would then become the Pacific plate over tens of millions of years. Even if this explanation is accepted, there are still many mysteries about the geological history of this plate. It wasn't until roughly 85 million years ago that the plate made contact with a plate that still exists today, the Antarctic plate. What happened in 100 million years between the creation of the plate and its contact with the Antarctic plate is a mystery. There are also unanswered questions about how the unstable triple junction came to be in the first place. These questions might seem insignificant today, but the Pacific Ocean is the oldest ocean on our planet, and understanding the geology of its biggest plate could help to explain more about the rest of the Earth's history. Number 4. The ocean is full of strange noises that can go unexplained by scientists for decades. A lot of the most well-known mysterious noises have now been solved, with explanations like underwater volcanoes and sea ice breaking off. But there's one mysterious ocean noise that remains unsolved. The Nunavut Ping was heard by sailors in the summer of 2016 and was blamed for the disappearance of wildlife that Inuit hunters typically depended on during those months. The sound was said to originate on or near the sea floor in the Fury and Hecla Strait, an Arctic seawater channel in the far north of Canada. This area is particularly important for hunters, as there's normally an abundance of sea mammals in both the summer and winter months. It also serves as a migratory route for bowhead whales. It's an important food source for those living in the region. But in 2016, hunters noticed that there wasn't much wildlife at all. Those familiar with the region found it eerily empty, as if something had scared off all the wildlife. At some point during the summer, sailboats traveling through the area brought with them an explanation. Sailors had picked up a pinging noise on their radar that seemed to be emanating from the sea floor. Some spoke about the ping on a local radio show, and it wasn't long before others called in to say that they'd picked up the mysterious Nunavut Ping too.
Now, I ain't suggesting that that's something extraterrestrial, but I know I'm not the only one sitting here listening to this video that's thinking it. I'm just saying, bro, we're all thinking it. We're all thinking it. It could definitely be something extraterrestrial, but let's see what type of answer they give us as to what they think it is.
The noise has also been described as a hum or a beep, and was normally inaudible to the human ear, but it could be heard on audio equipment and through the hulls of ships. It also was apparently audible to animals. The issue was raised at council meetings in the area, as many believed that this mysterious noise was the cause of the disappearance of the sea creatures. By late October, the national government had gotten involved to try to solve the mystery. Members of the Canadian military were sent to investigate the noise. There were a few possible theories that were put forward for the cause. The first was the Baffinland Iron Mines Corporation. It had conducted sonar surveys in nearby areas, and some believed that another sonar survey in the strait might be the cause of the noise. The mining company denied conducting any sonar surveys at the time when the ping was heard, or having any equipment in the water. A popular theory was that the noise came from Greenpeace or a similar organization. According to this theory, the goal was to stop mammals from traveling through areas where they would be hunted. Greenpeace denied any involvement in this. It would also be detrimental to the wildlife to do something that interrupted their migration, so it seemed unlikely that this was the cause of the ping. On top of this, no evidence was found. Another theory was that it was caused by submarines in the area, but there was also no evidence of this. An investigation by an acoustics expert found that there was no evidence for any cause or any evidence for the noise at all. They found that many people hadn't actually heard the noise and didn't get any responses when broadcasting a request for first-hand accounts. It's possible that the ping noise wasn't responsible for the disappearance of the animals at all. Instead, it was due to melting sea ice and shifting currents, leading them to take different routes for their migration, and the pinging noise was a mere coincidence. But if that was the case, it still doesn't explain what some people claim to hear coming from the bottom of the ocean. Number 3. Humans have been driven to want to explore the ocean for thousands of years. It's in our nature to be drawn to water, and to want to know as much as possible about the world around us. One of the oldest known cases of someone being lost at sea is the disappearance of Mansa Musa's predecessor, who allegedly sailed out to the Atlantic Ocean and was never seen again. Mansa Musa is one of the most famous African monarchs and is the wealthiest known person in human history. He ruled over the Mali Empire in the early 1300s and became famous due to his incredible Hajj to Mecca. On this trip, he and his entourage traveled in luxury. On one occasion, he spent so much gold on gifts and souvenirs that he flooded the local economy with gold. But it's one of the stories that he told on his journey that's captured the imagination of people hundreds of years later. The name of the person in this story is still debated. According to historians, the person who ruled Mali before Mansa Musa was Muhammad bin Chu, Musa's second cousin. But Musa allegedly claimed his predecessor was his brother, and the name Abu Bakr, the second, has been attached to him. The name Abu Bakr is used the most often. The story takes place during the king's rule around the year 1312. At this point, the Mali Empire stretched from the Atlantic Ocean into Africa's interior. It was one of the wealthiest empires in the world. A large reason for this was the gold mines that the empire sat on top of. It was an important trade for him and became a place where scholars would journey to. The Mali emperor had knowledge from all over the old world, but according to the story, Abu Bakr wanted more. He was obsessed with the sea. There had been some expeditions into the Atlantic Ocean, and a few islands were found, including some that are now part of the Canary Islands. But Abu Bakr wanted to find out if there was anything else. He sent a fleet of ships out into the ocean with supplies and told them not to return until their supplies ran out. Eventually, only one came back. The sailors said they'd come across a river with a strong current. All the other ships had traveled beyond it and disappeared. This made Abu Bakr even more interested in what there was beyond, and now he ordered the construction of a fleet made up of 2,000 ships, half of which would be used for supplies. Men, women, scholars, and holy men were taken with him as he sailed off into the Atlantic. Before he left, he designated that Musa would be acting ruler in his place. He would be able to take over the empire if Abu Bakr didn't return. Of course, he didn't, and Musa would become the kingdom's most famous ruler. People have speculated about whether or not this voyage actually took place. It's possible Mansa Musa was just exaggerating how many people left on the voyage, or made up the whole story to entertain his Egyptian hosts. If it did happen, the next question is what happened to it? Some believe there are artifacts that indicate a pre-Columbian contact between the New World and explorers from Africa. Evidence of this comes from everything from statues to the language that the ancient Maya used. But there's no definitive evidence that Abu Bakr landed in the Americas. If he did, he likely would have tried to set up trade routes between this new land and his old country, but this never happened. The perplexing mystery is one that likely won't be solved unless new evidence is uncovered with archaeology. Number 2. Scientists have been taking measurements at Bakr Ek Time Series Station. Located in a German bay in the Baltic Sea, it's been important to the scientific community to try to better understand our oceans and the creatures within them. But in 2019, the station made headlines around the world due to a mysterious disappearance that remains unsolved to this day. Scientists have been taking monthly measurements of everything from salinity to nutrient levels to temperatures since the 1950s. But in 2016, a new node was added to give continuous readings. The underwater observatory was dug into the seabed in the bay, 14.5 meters below sea level. It was made up of 2 racks, one of which contained all the sensors and the other provided power. The observatory fed data back to the base through a series of wires. At 8:15 on August 21st, 2019, the data coming from this observatory suddenly stopped. At first, the scientists thought this was due to some connection problems. It took a week for a dive team to set up to go down to the station and reconnect any loose wires. The team went down, following the cables until they suddenly stopped. The 2 racks had completely disappeared. The water quality in the Baltic Sea is such that it's impossible for divers to see more than a few centimeters in front of them. But a quick search of the area...
Oh, bump that. Y'all need to send one of Elon Musk robots down there, then I ain't going. That's what I told him, bro. Y'all better get a robot down here to go check on that thing. I'm not going there. I can't see. Bad enough, no, it's the ocean, but you add on the fact that now I can't see either. No, no, thank you.
Area confirmed that they hadn't simply missed the device in the gloom, it was missing. The Bakr Ek node weighed 770 kilograms and would have been very difficult to shift. This wasn't something that a sea creature could move or sea currents could move. Even a storm would struggle to have an impact on the observatory, and the sea had been calm at the time that it went missing. Some speculated that it might have been a submarine, which either accidentally or purposefully knocked out the device, but the water was too shallow for this. Another possibility was that it had been taken by people collecting scrap metal. It wouldn't be the first time the ships had scavenged underwater structures for scrap metal, though this is usually done to sunken ships rather than actively used observatories. They also wouldn't have gotten much money for the metal used in this case. The most likely theory was that a fishing ship had accidentally dislodged the device. The observatory was set up in a restricted area, so there shouldn't have been any boats above it, but sometimes ships would turn off their trackers and carry on into the restricted waters to fish. If this happened, their nets could have easily caught the wrecks. The police appealed to anyone who saw ships in the area to get in touch, but so far no one has come forward. Searches in the area were difficult due to poor visibility, but divers did find what appeared to be drag marks leading away from the observatory, but these trails led nowhere. In February of 2020, a search team located one of the racks roughly 200 meters from where it should have been. It was located in the complete opposite direction of the drag marks, and the second of the racks was nowhere to be found. There were still no clues as to who was behind this strange event, and it remains one of the more unusual ocean mysteries. Number 1. In 2001, ExxonMobil was inspecting a newly installed oil pipeline in the Gulf of Mexico when it came across something that it never expected. Cut almost perfectly in half by the pipe was an ancient shipwreck. 20 years later, the identity of this wreck remains a mystery. Nobody had expected there to be anything of any archaeological significance in this area of the ocean. The location was the Mississippi Canyon area, 65 kilometers southeast of the Mississippi River mouth. It had been an important shipping route for most of the United States' history, but nobody thought there was anything down there. No archaeological survey took place, and the pipe was laid without checking what would be beneath it. After it was laid, an inspection took place to make sure there weren't any breaks or twists in the line. It was only then that the wreck was discovered. The company immediately contacted authorities, who got to work trying to investigate the wreck. It was given the name the Mica Wreck, named after the canyon it was discovered in. By looking at the video evidence provided during the inspection, investigators could tell it was old, but they would need to have a dedicated search and investigation to get to the bottom of the mystery, and that was easier said than done. The first investigation took place in July of 2001. A robotic submarine was sent down to take a closer look at the wreck, but it immediately malfunctioned and became caught in the propellers of the research vessel. It was destroyed before anything could be found. Another attempt got a little further. The submersible made it to the wreck this time and managed to pick up a piece of rudder that would have helped the scientists to identify the ship. Unfortunately, the hydraulic system failed on its way back to the surface, and the rudder was dropped. Later searches couldn't locate the lost item. In a third research trip, the submersible malfunctioned in multiple different ways. The camera would only work when the thrusters weren't active.
Yeah, this isn't coincidence, bro. All of these, this is something happening to all of these things? Nah. I think they need to, pack up and go home. Don't come back here. Because right now, it's only happening to the devices that y'all are sending down there. It could start happening to y'all. I'll leave it alone.
And the hydraulic system on the docking station failed. Then the radar stopped working. The submersible still managed to make it to the ship and found that it had a copper coating. The scientists attempted to get the submersible to pull off some of the copper, but only a small fragment was detached and brought back to the surface. Nothing that was collected could help to identify the ship. The multiple problems faced by investigators led some to joke about the possibility that it was a cursed wreck. A more likely explanation for the bad luck was just how deep the wreck was. The wreck lies under 2,500 feet of water, and this was the first time archaeologists had explored a wreck in deep water around the U.S. The cause of the problems faced by the submersibles could all be explained by the amount of pressure the equipment was under. Despite the problems, some information about the wreck has been pieced together. The practice of coating wooden ships in copper began in Britain in the late 1700s and ended by the mid-1800s as shipbuilders started to work with less expensive materials. Historians estimated that it was built around 1810. Wood collected from the wreck also confirms that it was either built or repaired in the northeast US. It had 2 masts and probably contained cargo, though that has since been disintegrated. It might have been used to transport cotton to Europe or bring back luxury goods. Alternatively, it could have been one of the many vessels that traveled up the northern US. Unless more dives take place, it's unlikely we'll ever get an answer to this strange mystery.